recording and.
Okay, so
How is our mountain climber long distance runner this morning?
I'm sorry.
I said our mountain climber and long distance runners are not coming this morning.
We'll find out. It's a little more difficult getting into the building, so there's a little bit of a lag. Okay. So today's conversation or discussion is it's about Balak, this coming week's Torah portion. I think it's a very understandable conversation. It's going to take some pre-knowledge, so we're going to have to stop every once in a while just to give definitions of terms. I also don't. I prefer, sequencing of information is really important in conveying information. For my tastes, I would have sequenced it a little differently. So I played around with the slides. So whatever, text 5 is before text 4. Well, forgive me. I hope you'll agree with me that it makes a little more sense.
Moving around.
Okay, that's a large one to start with. Okay, so what I'm going to do is start right away with the overview of the Torah portion, which is on page 174. Oh, okay. You don't have to rise. Okay.
Are you recording?
I am recording. Today's the day I remembered it. Okay. Actually, one thing I didn't remember to do, let me just do it right now, is just want to unmute all for background noise, which is on now, and then we'll reshare. Okay. Okay. So as an overview of the Torah portion, before we get into this, at the end of yesterday's Torah portion, we find that the Jews were attacked by tribes in the desert, which happened quite a bit. This is at the end of their journey in the desert, and they were miraculously very successful in defeating these attacking tribes. A prominent tribe known as the people of Moab, and it's in today's Jordan, that area. Ammon and Moab. Ammon, I think, comes from Ammon. Ammon and Moab are two prominent tribes who figure into a lot of the biblical stories. The people of Moab get scared when they hear that the Jews have been so successful against some of their other, some of the other tribes in the desert. So Balak, to read inside, page 174, Balak, the king of Moab, summons the prophet Bilam, which is for some reason vocalized as Balaam, to curse the people of Israel. On the way, Bilam is berated by his donkey. Yes, his donkey speaks. It's the first Mr. Ed, who sees before Bilam, all of Hollywood ultimately comes from here, who sees before Bilam does the angel that God sends to block their way. 3 times from 3 different vantage points, Bilam attempts to pronounce his curses. Each time blessings issue forth instead. So the guy, he can't control his own mouth. And God shows him who's in charge. And this is a person of, he's a Jew hater, but he has spiritual sensitivities and powers. And he can't get himself to curse the Jews. Bilam also prophesies about the end of days and the coming of Mashiach. That's on 174. The people fall now at the very end of the Torah portion, and this is really what we're going to be talking about. Before we go to this next paragraph, the way the Talmud explains it is that they saw they weren't getting anywhere. Militarily, they weren't being successful. Bilam is not being successful in spiritual curses, so he advises people, if you want to get to the Jews, you got to distance them from God. So seduce them, stop attacking them, befriend them, and draw them into conduct that God doesn't want. That will weaken them, and then you'll be able to get done what you want to get done. So what people do is, they come with that. They send, it's in the world as it is. They send their women into the Jewish camp to entice the men to do the wrong thing. people fall prey to the charms of the daughters of Moab and are enticed to the worship of the idol Par. They used sexual attractions to bring them to idolatry. When a high-ranking Israelite official publicly takes a Midianite princess into a tent, Phinehas kills them both, Pinchas, stopping the plague raging among the people. So what we have is that this was going on amongst the Jewish people was a big problem. Then the Torah highlights, and I want to separate the two because we're zeroing in on really one piece of this. The Jewish misbehavior was horrible. Then it wasn't just the Jewish misbehavior. One of the leaders of the Jews took his Midianite paramour in public, in front of Moses, to be able to say, we're doing this. And we're bucking the system. It's not just a bunch of people, behind the tents doing what they got to do. Here they're out. He's flagrantly challenging Moses. So that is a different level of problem than the more public misbehavior. And then we get into a violent episode, which we're not going to discuss today, but it's something we can discuss a long time, because the Torah is Torah, and Torah is this code of laws, and we don't condone extrajudicial vigilante type of things to do. And Pinchas sees what's going on, and he stands up and he kills them both. This man and woman are together in front of everyone, in front of Moses too, and with a spear he kebabs them both, which is horrible. But he's in his standing up for godliness and justice, in an extrajudicial way, God actually says, you did the right thing. If he would have asked any rabbi, they would have said, you can't do that. They have to be tried and all of this. And see, capital punishment is a very, very difficult thing to achieve in Jewish law. In this case, and again, it's not today's discussion, but it's a fascinating discussion. It's in the language of the Talmud is that it's okay, but we would never tell you to do it. You can do it. Yeah. Phinehas is Aaron's nephew, Pinchas. Yeah. He's a prominent person amongst Jewish people. What he did was apparently, and because I want to talk about what they wanted us to talk about today, but in the Torah portion afterwards, God says that he approves of what Pinchas did, and he makes with him a covenant of peace. Covenant of peace for killing two people. It's a little bizarre. The idea is that Pinchas was not an aggressive guy. He was not known as an aggressive guy, because when an aggressive guy wants to get aggressive, you say, something. Maybe this is more about your personality than about the objective. Let's hear from a calmer perspective. This wasn't him. It was in my mind, and when we talk about this with people, so sitting around here, let's say, maybe even a few more of our people, and there's someone here who's African American or Hispanic or something where it is of a minority group, and somebody makes a comment, not just not appropriate, but like a bigoted, clearly bigoted comment. That's something where we get to shut it down now. Obviously, you don't take a spear to someone to say, that's stop. Sometimes you can't. It's not just about, hey, this isn't the way. Sometimes you have to really stand up and take and not go through the normal cordial means of a conversation, but put a stop to it. And he put a stop to it. He made his point. Again, it's an interesting conversation. It's not. None of this is, don't try this at home. We don't want to use a spear, God forbid, hurt someone because you see them doing something wrong. There's a judicial system. In this case, it was condoned. But the main thing is about what went on, the interaction between this prince of the tribe of Shimon and most of the Jewish people, who was taking this Midianite paramour, flagrantly flaunting Jewish law in front of Moses, and Moses doesn't do anything. Moses doesn't say anything. They're all frozen. That's the issue. What happens because they're frozen, Pinchas stands up and does something, that's another great topic, but that's not today's topic. It's what went on. So let's start. Hello. Okay. With text 1. And then we're going to go into the verses in the Torah which lay out what I had said before. So, as I say, this comes after Bilam had been trying to curse the Jews, and they're not being successful militarily against the Jews, and Bilam is not can't curse them, and he advises the people try and seduce the Jews into a non-Torah conduct. So Israel had settled in Shittim, a place there in the desert, and the people began to engage in licentiousness with the daughters of Moab. They invited the people, in other words, the Moab, to the feast offerings of their gods, and the people ate and prostrated themselves to their gods. Israel became attached to Baal Peor, and the wrath of God was aflamed against Israel. God says to Moses, 177, take all the leaders of the people and hang those who sin before God, facing the sun, so that the flamed wrath of God may withdraw from Israel. In other words, we want to see there's divine judgment in this. And then in verse number 5, Moses said to the judges of Israel, each of you all kills men who become attached to Baal Peor. This was something which it went through the system. They were doing something horrible, and whatever that was the Torah judgment. Separate to that is what we're talking about. Now, in verse 6, behold, one man of Israel came and brought a Midianite woman near to his brethren before the eyes of Moses and before the eyes of Israel. Aside from what was going out in the camp, there are a few million people that are all over the place and they're going to these feasts with the Moabites. Here, someone goes to the center of the camp, to Moses, in front of whoever's around there, but that's the center. This one man of Israel, and we're going to find out he was a leader of the Jews. There are 12 tribes. He's a leader of one of the tribes. He brings a Midianite woman near to his brethren before the eyes of Moses, before the eyes of all Israel, and they are weeping at the tent of meeting's door. Tent of meeting is the tabernacle. That's where they connect with God. And now, what are they doing? They're not protesting. They're not saying anything. They're frozen. They're crying. What's going on? You're doing this in front of everyone? What are we going to do? So the leadership is not acting. And Pinchas, the son of Elazar, son of Aaron, the priest, saw, and he arose from the community and took a spear in his hand. He went after the man of Israel into the tent and pierced both of them, the Israelite man and the woman through her abdomen, and the plague against Israel ceased. Those who died in the plague were 24,000. Now, Moses didn't act. He should have acted in some way or other. But what went on? Why didn't he act? It's not just what was going on in his mind, and why didn't he respond to these people? So let's look at text 2.
But it says he asked his judges to take action.
That was before. No, that's why I split up up to verse 5 and from verse 6 on.
Okay.
The first one was about the masses and what they were doing. I said, oh, we got to take care of this, and that was in a judicial way.
Right.
Then separately to that, and that's why I wouldn't have brought in verse 5 verses, because it's confusing.
Yeah, okay.
So I said separately to that, they say, actually, I probably could have taken out that whole, it was on a separate slide.
So the judges didn't do their job.
Moses didn't do it. No one did anything. They're frozen. Zimri comes up, it didn't say his name yet. This guy comes up with his paramour. When the people are out there, and they're out there for miles, it's a few million people. They go to the judges and the enforcers, and they take care of things. Then someone comes, and this is where we're focusing. Someone comes in front of the people with a paramour, does it, and they're crying. In other words, they don't know what to do. This is a flagrant slap in the face to God and Torah.
And there was no impeachment for judges then.
Not that I have found. Okay.
Okay.
But it's not so much about the judges, it's about Moses. Because it was his chief judge, right? Okay. Text 2a. So before we get to text 2a, a little bit of want to piece together knowledge here. Actually, I'm gonna go back up here, not to distract. Moses, I'm gonna I'm going to come back to this a second. I'm just going to mute all. Okay. The Moses is someone. Now, the Jews are the Hebrews, as I've mentioned other times. And from Abraham and Sarah, the Jews are the Hebrews until they come to Sinai. Sinai is like a mass conversion for everybody. So, and this is important for today's conversation, the Jews are not Jewish like us. In other words, we are more Jewish than Abraham and Sarah were. Abraham and Sarah were monotheists, and they spread their monotheism. And for someone to become part of the group of the Hebrews, they had to accept monotheism. But there was no official conversion process. And they weren't officially Jews. They were monotheistic members of humanity. At Sinai, there was like what we'd call a mass conversion, where we took on a specific character known as Jews. That's when we were given mitzvahs together as part of the Sinai process. Pre-Sinai, post-Sinai is a huge difference. It's pre-Jewish, post-Jewish. What happens? Moses grows up in Egypt before Sinai. It says he went to a place called Midian, which was also near Moab, and he married someone. He married a girl who's the daughter of a Midianite idolatrous priest. Her name is Tzipporah. If he married her, the assumption is, and we have it clearly in our history, she adopted the monotheistic perspective. There was no such thing as conversion at the time. Now, what happened? The guy's name, who we say a man rose. I mentioned before, he was a leader of the Jews. He brought his paramour, the Midianite paramour. Again, she's a cousin of Moses' sister, Moses' wife. And what did she say? Second. So his name was Zimri. So what did Zimri do? What did this Jewish leader do? He rose. He gathered 24,000 of Israel, and he went to a woman named Kozba, princess of Midian, and he said to her, "Submit to me." This guy's kind of a caveman, and he says, "Submit to me. I'm going to take you. You're out there. You're enticing all the men. I like you." She said to him, "I'm the daughter of a king. My father commanded me to submit only to the greatest of them." So he said to her, "I'm also the head of a tribe, but amongst the Jewish people, I'm a guy. You know, I got cred. Not only that, I come from the second. There's 12 tribes, and they're born in obviously in chronological order. I come from the second tribe. Moses comes from the third tribe. I have superiority to Moses. Here, I'm the head of a tribe. Over, I'm greater than Moses. I am the second of the womb. I descend from Shimon, the second son of Jacob, and Moses is the third of the womb. He descends from Levi, third son of Jacob. So he says to her that I want you to come with me, and because I'm worth it. Zimri seized her by her forelock, gentlemen, and brought her before Moses. He said, "Son of Amram," that's Moses' father was Amram, "is this woman forbidden or permitted? You guys are making such a big deal about the Midianite women. Out there, you guys, there's the judges and the police and going on. I'm bringing you my Midianite woman friend openly. And I want to ask you, Cosby, my friend, is she forbidden or permitted? If you say she's forbidden, who permitted the daughter of Jethro to you? Zipporah's father's name was Jethro. He said, you took a Midianite woman, and everything's holy. Why am I not to take a Midianite woman? It's got a challenge." And what the Talmud tells us is that the halacha eluded Moses. Moses didn't have an And that's why all the leaders bawled in their weeping, as this explains what that which is written. They wept at the tent of the meeting's door. If Moses has no answer, what are we going to do now? And this is striking at the core of who the Jews are. And it's a problem, it's a moral problem, but now they're undermined, they don't even have an answer. And it is written thereafter, and Pinchas, the son of Elazar, saw what was going on. He stood up and he did what he did.
The problem that it's a Midianite person, or is it, I mean, I get the idolatry thing,
Yeah.
that's that. But back then, I guess I'm not understanding what the problem is, they're just hooking up with other single women.
So they're hooking up. Once there was a Torah thing, if it was written today, it would probably be thou shalt not hook up. That it wasn't considered, because I think these are married guys, and
Oh,
and generally, but aside from that, it was really, once there was a Judaism, the idea was marry within our own. So the usual approach to this, and we're going to take a little different approach now today, but the usual approaches to it, they were hooking up with non-Jewish women. It's no matter, forget what happens, think about what should happen. Nah.
but there's enough women that you didn't have to go. I guess
Oh,
that's
for
the
sure.
thing, it wasn't enough.
No. We get there's no. This isn't a moment thing. This is yeah, or no, man, whatever. It's not. There's no indication of that at all. It was they were, sometimes guys are guys, and they were using that to draw them away, and so drawing them away to have this unholy connection with Midianite women, and then they were bringing in the heat of that, they were bringing in their idolatry. Now, the question is, why is that a problem? Text 2b. Who permitted the daughter of Jethro to you? Why is that a problem? Why is it a question? Moses had married before Mount Sinai. When the Torah was given, they were all non-Jews who entered into the general framework of the mitzvah together. Zipporah entered with them, as did many converts on the mixed multitude. Why is that a challenge to Moses? If there's a Torah, we're supposed to marry Jewish. That's what the Torah tells us. Before there was a Torah, there's no such thing as Jewish. So he found someone who agreed with the idea, and great, mazel tov. Moses is married before this. So what's the question? Who it permitted you? When she was part of the Jewish people, she left Egypt with them. She came to Sinai. She's part of the mass conversion. What's the problem? Why is this a problem? And because of that, in text 3, we find from one of the Medrash offers, Moses should have at least answered Zimri. He could have said, 1 second. Jewish law came into force when the Torah was given. And I married her before the Torah was given. What are you talking about? You're comparing yourself. This is 38 years or 39 years after the Torah was given. You have no right to do it. I was before the Torah was given. Or he could say, it's not converted her. But give an answer. Then perhaps Zimri would have responded and returned, and Zimri would have heard it, responded. Maybe he would have, teshuva means repentance. Maybe he was like, oh, I didn't think of that. Sorry. And God accepts all returnees. So why didn't Moses answer? Okay. So now we're going to shift gears. And we're going to pivot to a different way of seeing this. That that Zimri was not challenging Moses on the fact that he married a Midianite woman. Because he understood that was before Sinai. He had a different issue. What was the different issue? So I'm going to, as I mentioned before, I flipped some of these because I want to change the sequence. So in text 5, which is 182, and we'll go back to text 4 right after this. Rav said, this is from the Talmud. Moses, our teacher, was a high priest and would receive a share of offerings consecrated to heaven, as it says, it was Moses' portion of the ram of inauguration. Okay, I want to stand back a second. So anyone reading the Torah, you see 12 tribes of Israel, check. One of the tribes, Levi, the Levites, Levi, they are committed to God. Check. Moses his parents are from the Levite tribe. So Moses, his brother, his sister, they're all from the Levite tribe. All makes sense. Then at a certain point, God says, we're going to have, from the Levite tribe, we're going to have a special subsection who are going to be the priests, the Kohens. Aaron, Moses' brother, you are going to be the priest. You're going to be called, you're the first priest. You're going to be called the high priest. There will always be a high priest going forward as long as there's a temple. And now your kids going forward are all going to be priests. So at Thanksgiving, the Moses kids and the Miriam kids, they're the Levites, and Aaron's kids are Kohens. Cousins, they come from the larger Levite tribe, but they're a different subsection. A Kohen's not a Levite not a Kohen, although a Kohen is from the Levite tribe. So Moses is, if you're getting a test in school and say, who was Moses a Kohen? The answer is no, he was a Levite. Comes along the Talmud and says, not so fast. Moses, when we see from the Torah when the tabernacle was constructed and inaugurated, God said to Moses because they weren't functioning yet. The Kohens weren't functioning yet. He said, "You do the function." So he was a Levite who did some Kohen functions because it was before there were Kohens. It was we're just getting started, and he's the one in management who knows most what to do. So the Talmud goes so far as to say as that he had the status of a high priest. He was not a priest per se, but he was a Levite, but he did function as that. And priesthood only expired from Moses' descendants. So usually the child of a Kohen is a Kohen. You can't buy it, you can't sell it, you can't get out of it. The child of a Kohen is a Kohen. But the child of the greatest person in the world, if they're not a Kohen, they're not a Kohen. Moses' kids were not Kohens. Why? Because he wasn't really a Kohen. He had a Kohen function. So the priesthood, the Kohen status, only expired for Moses' descendants, as it says. But as for Moses, the man of God, his sons are named among the tribe of Levi. The Torah says it itself. Yet it also says Moses and Aaron among his priests, and Samuel among those that call upon his name. The Psalms does call Moses a priest because he functioned as a priest. So this kind of bizarre little factoid is that Moses, as much as a knowledgeable Jew would say he was a Levite, not a Kohen, he actually did have trappings of a Kohen. And therefore he has certain limitations of a Kohen. A Kohen has certain limitations. A Kohen doesn't go touch a corpse. A Kohen is kept in tried to be kept in a more spiritual atmosphere, and therefore, except for immediate family, a Kohen doesn't go to a funeral, doesn't go to the cemetery. Right? But one of our rabbis close by, he's a Kohen, and sometimes I have to fill in for a funeral. Bosovsky's a Kohen because he just can't. It's a tough position to be in a rabbi when he can't, deal with dead people, because that's what part of what we do. So that's just an example. A Kohen also has restrictions on who they can marry. When the Torah, the high priest had to marry only a virgin because of sometimes what goes along with the sexual intimacy. A regular priest can marry a widow or a virgin, but can't marry a divorcee. There's nothing wrong with divorcee. It's divorce is one of the Torah's 613 mitzvahs, so it's necessary. But it's still, it's because of what was seen as she's already what you went through with the divorce. So this is not for a Kohen. A Kohen's also not allowed to marry a convert. Converts, Ruth, tremendous converts we have. This is not, God forbid, anything about converts. But the idea is the way the Torah saw it is that the non-Jewish communities tend to be much more licentious. And therefore, this is not for a Kohen. She came out, she came to the Jewish people, she converted, wonderful, beyond wonderful, but in this sense, not for a Kohen. That's the way the law is. So since Moses, go ahead. Sure.
So, what determines who is descended from Cohen?
Well, today they say they've located Cohen genes and so on if you Google it, but in the way it's generally done is you want to see prior generations. For example, what determines who's a Jew? Someone comes here, they say they're Jewish. I can believe them. If they're gonna get married, I would need to see a little bit, let's say, their parents' wedding contract, where they're buried. You look, and this is a field that gets a lot of activity, especially people. A lot of people coming out of Russia, they don't have documentation. So a Kohen is also so. If they are like, there was someone here who I knew very, very well, and I gave him an aliyah a bunch of times. He wasn't a Judaically connected kind of guy. I asked him what's his Hebrew name. He thinks it's this. Your father's, he thinks it's that but they were similar. Ones you would imagine because they were like anglicized Hebrew names. And then when I did his mother's funeral, went out deep into Long Island. I look at his father's tombstone. It says Levi. I said, "You're a Levi." He goes, "What's that?" He says, how would I know? You look at a tombstone. You know what I mean? So if I assume some rabbi put that on a tombstone, I'm assuming he's a Levi. But there's a lot of confusion about that also.
So I was told that my grandmother was a Cohen. So does that mean that I am or no?
It really Jewish identity goes matrilineally. That's the mother. Tribe goes through the father. So the essential identity goes through the mother, and then are you from the tribe of Reuven or God, whatever that goes, or whatever Levi, that goes to the father. So it depends there on. Got it. I'm not a Kohen either.
Just curious.
Yeah,
I was
cool,
curious
cool.
about that.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So he says. So in text 5, we mentioned that Moses has the law of a Kohen. Now, taking that fact into the back of your head, let's go back and let's look at now text 4. He's a Kohen. So text 4 on page 181, we look at the laws about a Kohen from my mother. It says a woman who converted or was freed from slavery, even if she converted or was freed when she was under 3 years of age, being that she's not a daughter of Israel, she's forbidden to marry a Kohen. And I said, why? Because I told you why, because there was this assumed licentiousness in different communities. So Moses was not allowed to marry a convert. That's the bottom line. If Moses was not allowed to marry a convert, then from this perspective, Zimri, let's try and put all this stuff together. So the Jews are having this deal with Midianite women. Moses is sending out the judges and the enforcers saying, stop, stop, stop. Zimri, this Jewish leader, takes his paramour, Midianite paramour, and he says to Moses, who allowed you to marry a convert? You're preaching to us about who we're hanging out with. You're a Kohen. You have the law of a Kohen. Who are you allowed to marry a convert? She's one of our cousins. She's a Midianite woman. We know where she comes from, and she's one of you. You're not allowed to marry her. If that's the case, so stop preaching to us. That's what Moses was saying. That's what Zimri was saying. So now, in text 6, we find another Talmudic teaching that explains why Moses didn't have a problem with it. It says, what happens if a priest betrothed a widow? I said before, and again, we want to keep track of the little factoids here. Mr. Cohen, Ben Cohen, my friend who comes in here, he's allowed to marry a widow. Were there a high priest, and Ben Cohen was the high priest, he would not be allowed to marry. I said that before, okay? Now, what happens if a priest, this guy in the times when there was a high priest, because we don't have that anymore, he gets engaged to a widow, totally kosher. And now he's appointed to be the high priest. Does he have to break off the engagement? Right? I love her. I want to be high priest too, but I'm stuck. The law is that he may marry her. Why? Because he engaged. An engagement in Jewish law has it's not just it's actually a very important legal thing. Then you started this process when it was kosher. That's fine. There was an incident with Yeshua ben Gamla, a man in the times of the Talmud, who betrothed a woman named Martha bat Baitus, who was a widow, and the king appointed him as the high priest, and yet he still married her. So Moses, he would say to that answer, if Zimri comes along and says, you're telling us and you're pontificating to us about the women we're hanging out with, you're a Cohen, you're not allowed to marry a convert. He could say, I was married to her before there was a Torah. That's okay. Look, that's the law. Well, I married her in a kosher way. So now, why didn't Moses answer? So, because what we've come down to is two possible attacks that Zimri had on Moses. Why are you hanging out with a non-Jewish woman? Why are you hanging out with a convert? He has responses to both of them. But the Torah says he was frozen. The halacha eluded him. These laws are, why would they elude him? And second of all, but here he was quiet, and the people are crying, the leadership is crying because they're frozen until Pinchas stands up and does something. So now we want to shift to the idea, that's really today's topic, the idea of responding to a challenge. And here I also shifted some of the slides. There are two seemingly contradictory verses in the book of Proverbs. The book of Proverbs is fascinating. It's Solomon's pearls of wisdom. You really need to unpack most of them, but it's a fascinating book of guidance for life. And in two consecutive verses, he says seemingly contradictory things. Number 4, in verse 4, chapter 6. Do not answer a fool according to his or her folly, lest you become like them. Someone comes up and asks you a stupid question or challenge. Another one that I shouldn't say stupid, but it's something that you feel is something it's ridiculous to respond to. Don't answer. Verse 5, he says, answer a fool according to them, lest they be wise in their sight. Someone comes up to me and challenges me on my beliefs in the Torah. Am I supposed to? And I feel that the question is kind of not the brightest question. Am I supposed to answer them? Not answer them. Verse 4 says, don't answer a fool. Verse 5 says, answer a fool. Do not answer a fool means lest you become like them. In other words, don't get into the mud with them. And 5 is, if you don't answer, they may think they're correct. So what am I supposed to do? So if you look at 10, 10A and 10B, on page 186. The Talmud looks at those two seemingly contradictory verses and tells us something interesting. It says the rabbis sought to suppress the book of Proverbs too, because its statements contradict each other. The rabbis, when the scriptures being put together or being brought to the people, they don't want to give people things that are misleading to us, that take too much interpretation, that could cause, especially in those days, there aren't the books. You want to be clear in what you're teaching. So there are a couple of books where they said, you give this out to people, they may get the wrong impression. Better, let's not print this. They said that about the book of Proverbs. What are its statements that contradict one another? And they give an example. Answer not a fool according to their folly. And then the next verse says, answer a fool according to their folly. The people are going to look at this and say, this is crazy. Torah doesn't make sense. Torah is self-contradictory. It doesn't give us guidance. But they did put it out because it's not a contradiction. Text 10b, the idea contained in these two verses is explicit within them. Do not answer him or her in a matter where answering will only bring you down to the level. Answer a fool in a matter where if you do not answer them, they will be wise in their own eyes. I'm going to give you a few examples in my life where I think I can understand this. I've mentioned before that when I was a kid, when I was a teenager, I met another Jewish teenager, a few years older than me, who was very wrapped up in Jews for Jesus. I was 16 years old, a Torah guy, and he gave me. It was on a Friday. I'd asked him to put on tefillin. He met him in West Orange, and he gave me material that's from Jews for Jesus. And I spoke to him, and we made up to meet again the next week. And in the car, I was in a car with a bunch of guys, and going back to Morristown for Shabbos to the college, I look at the material, and it's quoting Isaiah and Jeremiah and the translations. Scared. I was thinking, holy, our book says this? Well, I was studying the yeshiva, but I can't study it all. I had no idea. So I tore, as soon as we got there, I tore into the study hall. I found a good translation, and I read it because I can read Hebrew, and I looked at some of the commentaries. I understood that they're all misrepresentations of the verse, but it scared me. The next Friday, I went with his material, and I said, I want to tell you what this really means, that really means, this really means. And he was polite, but then he said, well, what about Daniel 3:7? What about, he just, it didn't land. What I said totally didn't land. And I was really trying to engage him. I actually still have a bit of a relationship with him. And he grew out of the Jews of Jesus thing. But at that point, I was struggling. It was new to me. There was a student at the college who had been involved in Jews of Jesus, because there's a whole section there of students who are, who come from non-observant backgrounds. So I went over to him. I said, you know this, I don't. I have a friend, he gave me, and this is what went on. And he said, you'll never, ever succeed in arguing with him. He said, I was one of those guys. I was out in the street talking to Jews. And the language he said to me, we have what we call the Rolodex. You're trained. If someone responds, don't even entertain what their response. Just go to the next one. Just keep throwing. So don't even, embrace them with love. He said there's a cultish atmosphere to it. You're not going to get through the arguments. Don't respond. Just keep saying, maybe come over Friday night. That's what I'm telling him. Here's a Danish, just go. it was important to me because, what do you mean? He's telling me that Isaiah said this. I was like, no, Isaiah doesn't say it. You're not gonna get it. I thought about that recently, just about a month ago. I was calling a childhood friend, who's still a very good friend, who is the CEO of Chabad on campus. Chabad on campus is today a huge organization, but it's hugely important because what's going on. It's for Palestine and that. So I wanted him to speak at which he did, he speak at a college dinner, but I spoke to him about this, like the approach of what he's doing. So he said, the haters, we don't respond to. What am I getting at? They have their minds made up. He said, if they come to ask, and they said they're looking for information, if we're ready to, he said, we don't waste energy on the people who clearly have their minds made up, even if they're throwing a statement framed as a question at us. They don't mean the question because I'm not looking for information. It was as a perspective, and he reminded me of that. What this is trying to say, the two verses, is when someone is coming at you and they're using a question as a bet, where they know they're not looking for information, they think they know it all, and they're just coming to try and engage you and make you look bad, or maybe to shake your own perspective. Don't even bother answering. You get into the mud with someone you can't gain. Someone who say is actually sincere and looking for information, answer. Just a few months ago, or maybe half a year ago, was a local boy who got involved with Jews for Jesus. And he said he wants to talk to me, and his father asked me to talk to him. And I sat with him. And as he was going through his scriptural things, I was saying, the first one, I very much remembered what I had been told. I said, are you interested in hearing the perspective of the people who have kept this verse since it was written? So he said, sure. And when I explained it to him, took out a pen, he wrote it down, said, I got to think about that. I got to go speak to my Jesus Rabbi. I said, guy's being honest. He wants to learn. So we spent a lot of time together. He brought a bunch of friends. We had a whole Jews for Jesus thing in there. The thing. I said, bring your friends. If there were some people there who were not open to it, I'm not sure I'll do it again. But if people want to learn, how can I not answer? To just get into a debate with them, there's nothing. That's what we're trying to point out.
There was a video going around. Some black guy was harassing a rabbi.
Yeah.
And he was saying, I don't know, he was Orthodox guy.
He looked like a rabbi. He could have played one in the movies. Yeah.
And he said, do you know the blacks is the real Jews?
Yeah.
So he said, okay, we'll put on tzitzis and we'll go down
Yeah, I mean, some of these, it's just not. I love questions, and that's my oxygen. That's what I do. But then sometimes you learn something. It's not really a question.
And then
It's a statement, a very strong statement, or an accusation with a formal question mark at the end of it. But it's not a question.
and on a secular point, there was I heard Neil deGrasse Tyson talk about someone who said the moon landing is fake.
Moonlighting?
He was discussing with someone who believes the moon landing
Oh,
was fake, right? And he goes through all these things. He said, look, there are pictures of the sites. We could see it now. And the person he was talking with said, well, how do you know they're not fake? And then he said, look, forget it. You're not going to be convinced.
right. You learn in life. There's some people you're better off conserving your energy and not even engaging. That's what we're saying it was over here. So let's go back to text 7.
Sake of heaven.
This is from the Rebbe. We did not, oh, this is page 184. We did not always seek to answer the questions of others. Sometimes their question can be so impertinent so as to make a Midianite seem permitted. Sometimes people are asking a question that they're trying to make it's a debate whether something totally wrong is permitted. When the other person honestly intends, it's like if someone, just to stop for a second, if someone says, why is Israel committing genocide in Gaza? Answering that question is very dangerous, because answering is dignifying the question. Right. So you say, stop that. I reject the question. When the other person honestly intends for the sake of heaven, we must answer even a fool according to the foolish. When someone really doesn't understand, if someone says to me, and that's been a Jew here will say, what's going on in Israel? What's going on in Gaza? His babies are dying. And I see that it pains them. Say, let's look at this. Let's look at what's going on.
When did you stop reading your wife?
Exactly. But if the other person poses a question, I rejected that question. But if the other person poses a question in Torah terms, with the intention of permitting what the Torah forbids, we must take the approach of do not answer a fool according to the foolishness. Victory is achieved over such an opponent not by engaging in rational debate, but by displaying logic, defying strength. And as a great Jewish philosopher in the 11th century wrote, because he was a great poet, Rabbi Shlomo Megabiro, says, so says silence to the fool. Here's your answer. Silence. Because I'm not going to lower myself to engage in this conversation because it's not structured in a proper way. So now back to text 11, 187. Let's flesh this out. This rabbi of the 19th century, a Rebbe, much as a Rebbe, he says, when the evil inclination comes, namely the heretic, to seduce a person with his or her deceitful claims, the verse says, do not answer a fool according to their folly. Or if you reply to them, they will overpower you with a never-ending stream of even more corrupt and twisted questions. I'm reminded that across the street we have Millington Baptist Church, and we have a very good relationship with them. They're very good to us, and we hope we're very good to them since we're on this piece of property. Great people. There were a couple of years they would ask me to go across once a year to speak to their religious school. It happened like 3 years, I think. It was a long time ago. The last time that I was invited, which is probably, I'm guessing why I was disinvited, are no longer invited, is I was talking to like 11, 12-year-olds. And I had said, when I was asked to come in, I said, I'm not going to debate with kids. You don't want me to debate with kids? I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to debate with your staff either. If I'm there to talk to them about, which is what they asked me to do, to speak about my Jewish perspective, my Old Testament life, cool. I said, but I don't want to get into debates with them. And they said, absolutely not. And there was always a youth advisor there who made sure. The last time I was there, a kid said, can I ask you a question about your scriptures? About your scriptures and Jesus, I think he said something like that. So I looked at this adult and I said, so he said, go for it. So I said, go ahead. He said, how could it be? Is it possible you don't believe in Jesus when your own Psalms, each one ends with in the name of the Father, the Son, the Holy Ghost, or something like that? That's the way they end the song. I had no idea. So I said to the guy, I said, to the adult in the room, I said, we weren't supposed to get into this. But since he asked it, I didn't say this, but there could be Jewish kids in this room. I said, I don't want to leave that standing. And he says, go ahead, answer. So I said to the kid, how good is your Hebrew? I said, I have no Hebrew. I said to the adults, I said, how good's your Hebrew? I said, does anybody in the church read or understand Hebrew? I said, so I said to the kid, if you ask that question to someone who actually reads and understands Hebrew and is looking at the Psalms, they will tell you there is no question. I was like, they never invited me back. But the point is that it's sometimes you have to answer. You have to sense where it's coming from, and sometimes I'm not there. If someone comes over into this, throw that at me in the street, I'll just keep walking.
He was claiming that every psalm.
Every psalm ends with in the name of the Son, or begins with its name of the
Yeah.
Father, Son, Holy Ghost. Something like that. So that's definitely something Christian. So it made sense. The kid says, your own Torah it talks about Jesus. How could be you don't believe in Jesus?
My friend gave me, her kid goes to a Catholic school, and they have like a Bible
Yeah,
study thing, so I was flipping through just the Old Testament part, I don't know the rest of it, but I was like, which is like this much of it,
Yeah.
the rest of it, and when I'm reading, I'm like, and I can say this to my friend, I'm like, you do realize this isn't what it says, at all, like, I couldn't believe it was quite different.
There's a lot in the translation there. That's why we had this it was our thing with these Jews or J guys. Just said, look and say, I'm just talking Torah to you. Yeah, but that part I know. Yeah.
I need to do what Sarah did, because I'm cleaning out the basement and I'm finding multiple copies of books I didn't even know I had. So I'm putting all my Torah / Bible books together. And sometimes I want to look something up and they're all there. And I can go to JPS, I can go to, you're gonna go to Seminary and see all the different translations. It's very interesting.
The translations, I'm not talking about any of those translations. The translations, this is a separate topic. We'll finish with this. Translations have been a big problem for the Jewish people. Our own translations, because a lot of the Jewish translations were actually based on the King James. Even, just as an example, this is one of my bugaboos. I grew up in an Orthodox shul, from an observant family, an Orthodox shul in West Orange, not Chabad, but Orthodox. And we used every week, the Hertz Chumash. The Rabbi Dr. Hertz, chief rabbi of the British Empire, was this translation. Okay. God rest his soul, I'm sure he did his best. But in his translation, it said that the law is that an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth.
Mhm.
That was never the translation.
know what
It's
verse I'm
not.
talking
It's
about.
not the translation. What's your thing? It's never translation. It's a travesty. I was a little kid going to an Orthodox day school. And then afterwards, oh no, it doesn't really mean that. So I have to now overlay my interpretation, my apologetic interpretation, over what the Torah says. Torah doesn't say it. I can forgive the King James, because what would they know? How do they know? They're using a dictionary to try and translate the Torah. They don't know anything. Well, I don't expect Christian people to be able to understand the Torah, but for rabbis to print that, Orthodox rabbis to print that, that's crazy. And it went on it really went on a lot.
That's the one with the blue cover.
Yeah, I'm not. It's a function of the era. I'm not criticizing him. It's just Jewish publication was not big. Now it's exploded, but not when I was a kid. He did his best. And maybe he didn't want to fight City Hall and change the translation because it was so accepted. But that's only one. There's a lot of things in the translation that really did us a big disservice.
There's one of the things that drew my attention, and this is where the rabbis at the first Orthodox shows at, could not understand why I wanted to know who Russia, like I wanted to know who these people are,
Right.
because I'm like, they have an angle, and they couldn't understand what I was talking about, and then I found an example in Nachmanides, because I was reading a bunch of his, 2 different translations, 2 different yeshivas, And it was specifically about women's obligation to read the Torah, so that's why.
Yeah.
It jumped right in. The first one I read was very positive.
Yeah.
About them being closer to God
Yeah,
and being more
yeah.
spiritual, and if they want to do it, great, and if they don't, fine, and if they believe this today, it's right, if they believe this differently tomorrow, that's right too, it's all right, and then I found another yeshiva's translation of it, totally different, women are too dumb to read the Torah, and I was like, just that, right, so just that alone, as me coming in as like secular now to learn about it, like, what if I had read this one? I would have stumped out of the shore.
It's really, it's really one of my biggest bones in my throat. If someone asked me for a good book in English to portray Judaism, I struggle, even though there's so many books, because I would want to read through it to make sure that there's none of that. And how can I know for sure? Unless it's someone I totally trust. I don't have too many of them. Yeah.
I mean, that, unfortunately, you can't, and it's so layered, right?
It is
It's like
very,
you'll never-
it is very late.
I,
All right. So now text 12 and 13 are the final ones. Text 12. Which is, hello. We can divide misguided people into two categories. There are those who seek out the logic of a mitzvah, but as long as they do not yet understand it, they view it as odd and ridicule God's command. Okay, he's speaking a little harshly here, but the point is to say, someone comes in and say, this makes no sense. And then maybe, but explain it to me. But they think it makes no sense. Only once they understand the reason, will they accept it and act accordingly. And that's also only if they're open to it. Sometimes you're not open, you're not emotionally available to an explanation. This is a wrong way headed way and foolish behavior. But nonetheless, the wise King Solomon advises, answer this fool according to that folly. The reason being, lest they be wise in their sight. Saying, I am wise. I'm sophisticated about each mitzvah I do, unlike those who blindly believe everything and do not understand what they do. However, there's another much worse form of corruption. Oops, apologize. Wherein they question the logic of a mitzvah, intending only to destroy the practice of mitzvahs and mock them. They present their challenge as an innocent question only to hide their intentions from the question, posing it deceptively as if they were inquiring about the reason for a mitzvah. I know for myself, if I am speaking to a Muslim or a Christian about and I ask a question about their religion, I need to be in a place where I'm open to hearing them. And it takes work because that's not my deal, but I've got to open to hearing them, put it in its place. Let's say they make sense, where that figures in, but I don't want to be a deceptive questioner. I don't want to ask just to be able to show them. And listen, it's so easy to show contradictions in the Testament. I never do that. And I will say to my friends, I have enough respect that they probably have explanations. I don't like if they come in and they look superficially at the Torah and they say, oh, this. You want to learn? Ask a question or looking to learn. I'll never do that. I'm never going to go say, but this verse contradicts that verse in the New Testament. What do I know about the New Testament? I'll tell you about the Torah. That I can tell you. And that tells you something about the New Testament. The wise King Solomon trusts us to discern the intention of a challenger. When we understand they come to deceive, seeking only to excuse and justify themselves, the verse warns, do not answer a fool according to their folly, for it will do no good and they will only mock your words. Lest you become like them, warns that you'll only be burned by their tongue's flames and trapped in the snare of their mouths. So there's some people you want to be able to spend time with and explain to, and some people it just doesn't pay. Oops. Okay, now text 13, the final one. It is better not to answer his or her folly and doubts, the reason being lest you become like them. This means you too will appear to be uncertain, trying to resolve your doubts. The fool's entire purpose is to create the perception that you too are doubtful. Then they win the point that you're just like them. I think that will be engaging as to the question of genocide in Gaza. You can engage that question because then you're on the same. You've gone down to their level and assumed a certain platform for the conversation. Thus, your lack of response will harm their cause more than any answer you could say. If you answered their query and exposed their mistake entirely, it would indeed harm their cause, but they still gain legitimacy from the fact that you answered the question as if they were onto something. This demonstrates that there are legitimate questions you must answer. But the moment you refuse to reply, their cause suffers more, for they are unable to achieve the aim of their argument. This demonstrates that you too have doubts. That is meant by, this is what was meant by, so silence to the fool. Here's your answer. It is as if the person asked, am I right? And your silence itself tells them, you're wrong. Still, despite having said not to answer the fool according to their folly, the wise King Solomon continues, but answer the fool according to the folly, lest they be wise in their sight. He means you must answer them in a way that they no longer believe themselves to have been wise. They must find themselves at a loss for an answer. To accomplish this, answer them lightheartedly, for the point is to expose their foolishness, not to lend their argument credence. And sometimes you don't want to leave it. But it's sometimes you make a bit of a joke out of it. You have to use your judgment that you don't want the damage that be just leaving a question hanging, but there can be damage from responding to it too. So this is why Moses chose not to respond, because the way it was coming out is you're not open to an answer. And me engaging you means now it's a conversation whether we can hook up with these Midianite women. It's not a conversation. Look at key points. Parshas Balak concludes with many Jewish men sinking into sin with the daughters of Moab. God orders that justice be done. But one leader, Zimri, flaunts his relationship with the Moabite princess Cosby and accuses Moses of hypocrisy. Number 2, despite having numerous answers to justify himself, Moses did not respond to Zimri's accusation. This was because he saw that Zimri was already committed to his act without regard for facts. Number 3, responding in good faith to a question or accusation leveled in bad faith is dangerous, as it lends unwarranted credibility to the question and presents indisputable truth as if it were subject to debate. Number 4, in our personal lives and our Jewish lives, we must identify the values that are not up for discussion. And we should respond with strength, not defensive words, when we detect that a challenge is aimed solely at shattering our conviction. I'm going to stop the share here. So if there are any questions.
Watching last night when Biden finally came out to make a statement.
Yeah.
Because it happens. And some reporter actually asked him, do you think this was an assassination attempt? I almost threw my shoe at the people. You want those ridiculous questions?
Right.
Hello? No,
But that's what
it's
a
part
lot
of,
of, yeah,
it's part of practice next door.
a lot of reporters will do this. They'll,
Oh,
when
absolutely.
they're asking their question, they're actually making a statement.
Yeah.
But and sometimes questions are not asked in good faith. And sometimes, yeah, I'm not going to get into the whole thing of Biden stepping down all that, but a point that I think was a legitimate one that he made was, if he goes for a cognitive test, so, but did you go for that cognitive test? How many cognitive tests? I think that totally would be the case. I'm not saying you shouldn't go for a cognitive test. I'm just saying is that's just the way the game is played. And if people are, if it's someone I love and I care, I speak to my father about taking a cognitive test, it's because I care and I'm trying to prove a point, and it's a question, and I haven't taken. I don't think it's important. I'm just saying for him now, but then he can respond to it. If it's just another way of scoring a political point, it goes on both sides going. I mean, it's a common political thing, and you're right. You feed that. Just the next challenge is just around the corner. All right.
So,
Yeah. Oh,
we have to. I still need to drill down on this thing with Moses and the judges,
okay.
because, well,
Good.
we don't have to do it now. I don't want to delay people.
There was a judicial system,
Right.
and an enforcement system to the extent it was,
Okay.
and within that judicial system, there's a penal system. As far as capital punishment, that was a very, very high bar of evidence, which made it almost impossible. This was a case where there was something widespread, and it doesn't tell us the details of what Moses did, but he wanted to put a stop to this widespread less interested.
But he tells us judges to do it. And they don't do it.
They did do it.
Hmm?
They did do it.
Well, they did do it.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
They're out there in the,
They were going out.
they were out doing their thing. This was going on in headquarters. Okay,
Now I understand. Right, no,
Okay.
no articles of.
hope to see you all Wednesday evening at the dinner, the gala. Be well.
Thank you, Rabbi.
I would
That's on Wednesday.